missing 6 months ago just went out to work one day and never came home. It was a horrible shock to the whole neighborhood because things like that just didn't happen in our little slice of white picket fence suburbia. The police launched an investigation, and the neighborhood watch sent out search parties, but no one ever found any evidence to indicate what really happened to him. Our families were devastated. Recently, the missing posters have been taken down or papered over. The updates from the police become less frequent and dwindled away. I accepted that, hard as it was to admit. My Rick wasn't coming back. Until he did. A week ago, I was in my back garden watering my petunias when I heard the garden gate creak open. I jerked my head in the direction, and there he was. Exactly the same as he was the day he disappeared. Same wind-swept blonde hair and bright blue eyes, same curl to his pink lips. I was in shock. Our families had mourned for him, and yet there he was, standing in our garden like he had just popped out for milk or something. When I asked where he had been, he said he didn't know. He couldn't remember anything about the last 6 months. All our friends and family are beside themselves with joy. They almost can't believe it, but that's the thing. I don't believe it. Look, I understand how crazy this all sounds. I do. Our families would never believe me, and I can't go to the police unless I want to end up in a straitjacket. But I just know that the man sleeping next to me isn't my husband. I don't know what to do. I know I should be happy, but I'm not. I'm terrified. I don't know much about anything supernatural or paranormal. I don't even like watching horror movies, but something about this whole situation makes my skin crawl. Just let me explain why I'm so sure. Once I've done that, hopefully one of you will believe me, and you'll be able to tell me what to do. The morning after Rick came home, I made him a cup of tea. When I handed it to him, he gave me the brightest smile. Then he took a sugar cube from the dish that was on the table and dropped it into the cup. Our house was in chaos with his return, and I was still in shock, so I didn't think much of it at the time, but it's been replaying in my mind ever since. I know it doesn't sound very significant, but my husband never put sugar in his tea. He was always adamant that it ruined the taste, and he'd get so frustrated if I ever put sugar in his cup by accident. And yet, this man had put sugar in his tea. Then, it was the golf. A few days ago, when he was visiting his mom, I recorded a golf tournament that was showing on the TV. It was one of Rick's favorite golfers that was competing, and he never missed it. Once he even skipped out on an anniversary dinner just to watch a championship. Only when he came home from his parents and I told him what I'd done, he just seemed unbothered. Like, he said thanks and everything, and then he asked if I wanted to get dinner. He didn't even watch it, and that's just so out of character for him. Then, one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to see Rick's face inches from mine, looking at me with these blank eyes. I kinda gave this nervous laugh and asked, "Babe, what are you doing?" And he didn't answer. For a solid 30 seconds, he just stared, almost like he was looking right through me. Then he suddenly smiled and said, "Sorry, honey, sometimes I just can't believe this is real." Then he rolled over and went to sleep. I didn't get much sleep after that myself. Yesterday, about a week after he came home, the neighborhood threw a street party to celebrate his return. Everyone from our street and the streets on either side turned up to see him and tell him how happy they are that he's alright. When he wasn't standing with his arm around my waist, he was milling around, chatting amicably to each and every one of our neighbors, even little kids. Jackson, our next door neighbor, Sally's toddler, wanted to play peekaboo, and Rick happily played along with a smile on his face. Now, my husband never did that. Rick always said he didn't like kids, that's why we never had any, and so he never wanted to play with any of the neighborhood children, especially not Jackson. Rick all but avoided him. Before he disappeared, I had started to suspect it was so I wouldn't see them together and noticed the subtle but unmistakable similarities. The final nail in the coffin, proverbially speaking, Honestly, I'm this close to going out tonight and digging up my petunias just to make sure he's still under there. I don't know what I'm sharing a bed with, but I know it's not my husband. Alrighty. That was the first one. I remember reading that and being so shocked. Okay. Next up is called The Ripper of Rathbone, and this one was written by Frosty Flake. Alrighty. Two teenage boys of the age 18 have been notified as missing since Wednesday, the news reporter announced. Police say that these boys may have fallen victim to the notorious Rathbone Ripper. He added, they were last seen at the Rathbone pub. Chills always seem to make their way down my spine at the mention of the Ripper. Not a week goes by without someone new ending up dead. Be careful, Mike, Mom says while struggling to cut her pork chops. Many people around here have already died, and every day I pray that nothing happens to the both of us. Teardrops stain the tablecloth next to her plate. I reach out and cover her hand with mine. I know, Mom, if anyone comes my way, I'll use those deadly judo moves on them. I joke as she tries to laugh. Then I bring up something I've been telling her a lot lately. We should move out, Mom, to another city. This place is dangerous. Darling, you know we can't. Another tear makes its way down her cheek. All the memories you shared with your dad are here, and I couldn't bear to leave this house. Mom's always so sensitive about this subject, but she needs to understand that if we stay here, it won't be just Dad that died in our family. Let's just enjoy the food now, okay? I didn't make Saturday specials just to throw it away, she complained. Yeah, we can't let these delicious pork chops go untouched, I said, trying to sound cheerful. My dad wasn't killed by the Rathbone Ripper, at least that's what the police speculate, because his body was found unlike all the other missing bodies. The bodies taken by the Rathbone Ripper were nowhere to be seen. Regardless, I believe otherwise. My dad was murdered just before the Rathbone killings started, and his killer is yet to be found. Some people want to believe that their loved ones are still alive somewhere, but the longest missing person has been gone for over 4 months. My blood curdles until I feel as though my body has been set aflame. Mom's right. We can't run. I need to find the man who killed my father and bring him to justice. I work a night job at a local pizza outlet till 1 a.m. I admit it's a bit frightening since it's a convenient setting to get murdered, right? But I need to be able to support my mom now that Dad's gone. It's exhausting sometimes, especially since I need to be at school in the morning, but today was my lucky day. Little did I know how much I would jinx that. The manager let me out 2 hours early. I was cycling back home when I saw a dark silhouette crossing the forest land that lay a few meters away from our neighborhood. It was difficult to see clearly with the trees on the sidelines intervening my view, but I could definitely make out someone there. I abandoned my bike and silently crept closer using the shrubs and bushes for cover. My heart was in my mouth, and I felt every cell in my body shivering as it tried to fight against the anticipation and dread as the figure came into full view. The figure stood with its back to me. It was cloaked in a long black coat and a ski mask. Not an inch of skin was showing, and I couldn't see the face, but I assumed that this was a man. I would have thought this was the Grim Reaper himself, if it were not for the duffel bag slung over his shoulder instead of a scythe. The bag looked empty. Slowly, the figure circled around the spot and knelt on the ground. I heard the soft click of a latch opening. The next thing I know, the figure jumps down a hole. I tried to keep my breath steady, but as he re-emerged, my breath caught in my throat. 2 disembodied legs are tossed across the ground. 2 legs. A dazzling blue anklet is attached to one of the legs, and an heart-wrenching sense of pity washes over me. At this point, I had to dig my fingernails deep into the ground to stop the world from spinning. This is it, I thought. This right here was the Ripper of Rathbone. I wanted to do something, but an overpowering sense of hopelessness came on to me. I didn't want to die. So, I stayed paralyzed in my spot and watched as the Ripper carefully covered any traces of him moves scene with 2 legs and its duffel bag. It took me a while to break my stupor. I stumbled across a small clearing and with trembling fingers undid the latch. As I lifted it, a wave of putrid stench hit me, and below me lay heaps of rotting dead bodies tangled and twisted in strange angles. I could not make out any faces because the moonlight was dim, but I've already seen more than I can handle. Slowly, I covered any evidence of my presence, and in a trance-like state, I got myself back home. I immediately got into the shower and hastily started scrubbing away at my body. The hysteria kept building up. It was clinging to my body. Maybe if I scrubbed harder, I thought, it might go away. The next morning, as I lay there, awake in bed, I had to come to terms with it. What I went through was real. It wasn't a dream, and only I knew, so I had to tell the police. I had to. My appetite was still not back, and I felt nauseous, but still, I forced myself down the stairs. Sunlight was streaked across the kitchen, and the aroma of bacon and bread sizzled in the air. Mom was singing along to Dancing Queen on the radio. "Good morning, Mikey," she exclaimed while handing me my plate. As she did so, something on her arm clinked against it. I glanced at her arm as the light caught on her bracelet. Its blue crystals shone upright in the sunlight. Horror struck me right in the heart. The last time I saw the bracelet, it did not belong to my mother, but to one disembodied leg that was carried in a duffel bag. I stared down at my plate of toast and bacon, my mouth agape, my eyes frozen in terror as another sick realization dawned upon me. About 4 months ago, my mother picked up a new cooking specialty. Anyone in this town would be down to bet that my mom served the most delicious pork chops they've ever tried. It tasted like bacon, but different. When asked what her secret recipe was, she'd simply say, "It's a secret." Alrighty. Next up, this one is called "I Took a DNA Test and Won a Free Vacation," and this one is by Top Neighborhood 859. Alrighty. About a year ago, my brother did a DNA test online and received a detailed breakdown of his DNA. It turned out that despite the stories we'd been told growing up, we were not German. His DNA showed that he had predominantly English DNA along with some Greek and Mexican. He called me several times over the next 6 months and continued to give me for a second. I had some vacation time that I wanted to use, and a free trip to Mexico sounded more fun than the staycation I could afford. "You're sure it's 100% free?" I asked. "Yes, sir, 100%. Can we set a date?" I set the date to allow me to get my supervisor notice and booked the vacation over the phone. A few days before the trip, I received a knock at my door. I checked my doorbell cam on my phone to see a man standing at my door. He had a hat and a surgical mask on, which I thought was pretty typical now during the pandemic. But what threw me was the sunglasses. It was almost dark outside, and he had some very large frame glasses on. "Can I help you?" I asked through the app. Without looking at the camera, he answered, "I have your bus ticket." He held up an envelope so that I could see it. "For your trip," he added. I opened the door, and as soon as he handed me the ticket, he turned and walked away. The interaction left me with a very uneasy feeling. Even after I'd opened the envelope to find a bus ticket, hotel reservations, and itinerary, I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man seemed as though he didn't want me to see his face, or didn't want to be on camera. I didn't sleep much that night. I began to feel a bit better when I got on the bus. It was a very long trip, but it was fun. Aside from a couple of obnoxious drunks on the bus, and one guy in particular that creeped me out, I thought he may be on the run. He had his hood up and a gator mask that covered off his face. I saw him get on the bus at the same time as me and kept turning around and looking at me. After almost 3 hours, I was beginning to worry, but he ended up getting off the bus one stop before me. I sighed a breath of relief. I checked in at the hotel, and the man at the desk couldn't find my room. He had to get the manager to help me. Here it comes, I thought. They got me all the way here, and I have to pay for the room. I thought to myself. I pulled out the itinerary that I'd been given, and the manager nodded. "Oh, I see. I have your reservation under a company name. That's the problem. They paid for your room in cash, but didn't give me a name." I got checked in and got my room key. The room was pretty nice. Not exactly what I expected for a 4-star hotel. I put my bag on the bed and was going to shower, but the phone rang. Not my cell phone, but the landline in the room. I answered it, and a man told me that he was my driver. He was waiting downstairs to take me to dinner. I was already half undressed and tried to get out of it, but he insisted. "Sir, part of the arrangement is that I'm supposed to make sure you get pictures as often as possible. They are having a big party at the resort down the street. I promise I will have you back in a couple of hours, and the dinner will be paid for." I complied. They had told me to take pictures, so I got dressed and headed downstairs. I met the driver, and he took me down the street to a huge hotel down the road. It was a big step up from where I was staying. The restaurant was downstairs. The driver told me to get a seat, and he would order some food. He met me at the table with food and beers. We ate. The music was too loud for us to talk, and he didn't say a word at all. As we ate, I saw a woman at the bar that gave me a few glances. I finished my food and chugged the rest of my beer. "This would be a good time to get your pictures," I yelled at the driver over the music. "What?" he asked me. "You said I needed to get pictures," I told him. "Right," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket, but stopped. "Let me see your phone. I'll take the pictures," he told me. Why would he use my phone? I asked myself. I figured he would have a camera, or at least use a company phone, but the beer was hitting me kinda hard. I'd never been much of a drinker, but I felt pretty drunk for only having one beer. I stood up so I could get my phone out of my pocket. When I stood, though, I immediately became dizzy. The whole world started to spin is The Problem with Dave, and this was written by Lurka Luna. It's not that he's a bad roommate. No, it's not that at all. If he was inconsiderate and doing things like leaving dishes and dirty socks all over the apartment, or playing death metal at 3 a.m., then maybe I'd feel justified in my dislike of him. If there was just one discernible grievance that I could explain without sounding immensely childish, then maybe I wouldn't feel so unsettled by his presence. But there's not. At least not a good one, so I've kept it to myself until now. Let me preface this by saying that Dave is polite, quiet, and clean. He's never been late on rent, and he always takes my boundaries into consideration. That might make it sound like he goes out of his way to avoid me, or that we never interact, but it's not like that at all. I talk to Dave more than I have in my past roommates, and our conversations are always pleasant. Never once have I had to argue with him. Dave just seems introverted, as am I, and we respect each other's space. If we are in common area together, we'll sit and talk. We've even binged a couple of Netflix series together since we are both into the horror genre. Though I've had to tap out a couple times. Dave's stomach for gore is much stronger than mine. So, to surmise, for the past year, Dave has regularly sat next to me on a ratty thrift store couch, just shooting the breeze, and I've enjoyed our conversations. I'm telling you all this because I know that when I tell you what my problem with Dave is, everyone is going to try to tell me that I must have had a problem with something else. I know that you'll try to tell me I'm just focusing on a little thing because there's something else, something about his personality that unsettles me, but there's not. After almost a whole year of living with this man, I can safely say that there isn't a single aspect of Dave's personality that I find off-putting. I look forward to our Netflix nights, and I think he's quite funny in a dry sort of way. He doesn't really do anything that would typically upset me. One of my biggest pet peeves from past experiences with roommates is when they take something of mine, batteries, clothes, money, without asking. Dave has never intruded on my personal space or stolen anything from me. Honestly, it should feel like I've hit the jackpot after my last roommate, Ryan. He ruined the sink by pouring hot grease down the drain and bailed before fixing the damages. Ryan also had his girl over almost every night, and they were so loud that I received notes from the neighbors. Now, Dave's not asexual by any means. He's a couple years younger than me, 24, and like clockwork, he has a different woman come over every 2 weeks on a Saturday night. The first month he lived here, he gave me a heads up that he had a date. I immediately was reminded of Ryan and became worried that I'd gotten another roommate from hell, but nope. Thankfully, I was wrong. Each date night, Dave and some random girl stumbled through the door. Maybe the girl will wave at me or say hello, and if they do, that's the only thing I hear out of them. It was completely quiet after they entered Dave's room. I work from home, so I often sleep in late, especially on the weekends. Dave knows this, and honestly, I'm surprised by how much he takes this fact into consideration. I've already got a pair of noise-canceling headphones purchased during the Ryan era, and honestly, I don't mind wearing them to bed twice a month, but there's no need. Well, there's no need on his date nights. The other nights, well, I'll get to that in a moment. The point I'm trying to make is that Dave is so respectful. I've never once been woken up by one of his one-night stands leaving. In fact, I've never even seen one leave. Dave is just that considerate. He keeps that entire part of his life as quiet as possible for my sake. He always makes breakfast the next morning. At first, I thought it might be some sort of apology to me, maybe thinking it had been too loud or maybe uncomfortable with his Saturday night antics, even though I assured him that as long as I don't have to hear it, I don't care what he's doing in his room. But now, I think it's some sort of ritual, maybe a self-congratulatory sort of thing. Either way, every other Sunday morning, I wake up to the aroma of meat frying. Dave keeps the fridge stocked up well with excellent cuts of meat, and he seems to love cooking, even if he doesn't eat saying that I absolutely cannot mention this to him, and I think I know why. Dave doesn't eat much. Aside from Sundays and the rare rib dinner, I never see him eat. He's so skinny that I suspect he struggles with some sort of eating disorder. I tried asking about this once in a roundabout kind of way, and David responded with, "People often can't stomach the sight of my meals." So, yeah, it's probably an eating disorder. Since he's so small, he might have experienced some bullying in high school, or maybe grown up in poverty and developed some sort of issue with binging after he got money. Either way, that's just speculation. The little voice in my head keeps screaming to never break up the sounds because of how awful would it be if I made him feel bad for simply eating at night. What if I worsen his condition? Would I have to watch Dave waste away because of a petty comment of mine? I don't want to know the answer to those questions. All I know is that he doesn't feel comfortable eating full meals in front of others very often. Again, it's been almost a year since he moved in and still not even comfortable around me. Maybe he can sense my issue with him. I hope not, as I think he is a wonderful person with the exception of this one petty thing. But back on topic. The chewing. The only thing I can think to compare it to is my mother's dog. She had a pit bull named Daisy when I was growing up. She was this beautiful dog with short black fur that loved cuddling and was the epitome of sweetness. I thought she could learn to fly, but that thought was provoked in a violent fashion. One day, a friend of mine broke into our house. He was trying to pull a stupid prank and climb through the kitchen window in a scream mask, intent on scaring me. And he did. I shrieked like a little girl, and Daisy came barreling into the kitchen. I saw her mouth open. All those white teeth suddenly looked much sharper as the muscles in her neck bulged. She seemed to practically soar past me. Daisy chomped into my friend's shoulder, knocking him down. There was this resounding crack as he fell. At first, I thought he hit his head on his counter, or maybe even broken his neck, but the crack was actually Daisy, locking her jaw in place and crunching into his collarbone. On the ground, Daisy didn't let go. She kept her mouth rigidly shut and shook her head back and forth. There was a wet, tearing noise that seemed even louder than the screaming. I remember thinking that she was ripping him apart. In the end, my friend was relatively okay. He had to have reconstructive surgery on his shoulder and was in physical therapy for the duration of our high school careers. He walked away with minor nerve damage and a near debilitating fear of dogs. The doctors say he got off lucky. I'll never forget the sound of Daisy crunching into his bone, ripping the flesh off of his body with unnatural ease. I couldn't believe sweet Daisy, who loved cuddles and once let a butterfly land on the tip of her nose, looked so natural, with a mouthful of blood. I thought that she could learn to fly, but she nearly eviscerated my friend. Don't get me wrong, I still love Daisy, and when she was taken away for aggression testing and my mother told me it was likely she'd been put down, I sobbed for days on end. Daisy was my beloved pet, and I knew that ultimately she'd only try to protect me from what both she and I had perceived to be a threat. I was just shocked by what she had done, or rather, I was shocked of what she was capable of. And now the sounds I hear from Dave's bedroom, the sounds I cannot block out with noise-canceling headphones or music, the sounds that permeate my nightmares, be one of the biggest in the city. So it seems. I used to do construction too, you know. That was way back in my day. I started back when your mom was probably a toddler. Oh yeah, with the company or freelance, or my papa had a small construction and carpentry business. He hired me when I was maybe 15 or so. That was all the way back in 1962. We built houses, mostly a couple small apartment complexes, nothing as big as what you're working on. Did you like it? Boy, you bet your ass I did. Working all day was a free gym membership. Plus, all the perks that came with it. Perks. He smiled. Can you keep a secret, boy? Yes, sir. You ever play in a construction site as a child? When I was a little one, me and my buddies would sneak into houses being built and explore. Maybe break a couple bottles here and there. Yeah, my neighbors and I used to do that when I was a kid. My house was one of the first built in our neighborhood. Then the rest came later. We probably explored every house in the block before they were finished. Maybe when they were just wood skeletons, you know, maybe break in a couple bottles too, to tell you the truth. Of course he did. Who wouldn't, given the opportunity? But that's all the childish stuff. The real perks came later in life, when I was an adult. Oh yeah, boy. Imagine this. The year 1980 with no cell phones in sight. You talk up a pretty lady at the local bar and hit it off. Tell her about your new construction project and she wants to go see it. Well, then you take her there. You and her all alone in skeleton of a home, as you said. Wouldn't it be a bit more private at your own house? More private, sure, maybe, but much messier. I paused. How so? Well, you don't just take a girlie down to construction at night to get your diddly fiddled with. You take her for, you know. No, I don't know. For the easy disposal, boy. Disposal? You cut the girlie up, or do whatever your preference is. You do whatever you want to do with her, and you put her under the house. You bury her in your stank clothes under there too. Once the job's done, no one will ever see that stuff again. It's gone. Eventually, a brand new house is sitting on top of your deed. The bus rolled to a stop. Well, this my stop, he stood, patted my shoulder, and I recoiled. He walked off the bus. The only thing running through my mind was a memory. I was a kid, no older than 6. My friends and I were playing hide and seek. I hid in the crawl space on my front porch, and when I was hiding, I found a pair of boots I buried in the dirt. The same type of boots I was wearing then, on the bus. The exact same boots we'd found in the crawl spaces of every house in our neighborhood. That one creeps me out so much, I don't know why. Okay. Next up, this one is called Drive Safe, and this one was written by Mr. Na, I believe. Alrighty, here we go. My ex always hated our dog, but he probably would have taken her too if she weren't so ugly. If Lulu were one of those cute mini golden doodles or corgis, or even one of those goofy looking dogs that are charming in their ugliness, think Danny DeVito or Steve Buscemi, only in a dog version, then I had no doubt he would have claimed ownership of her too, along with everything else in our apartment. But Lulu is just a plain old ugly dog, and for that and so much else about her, I'm forever grateful. I don't want to talk about my ex too much here because this isn't about him, but I do need to explain why I was traveling across the country in the middle of the night with my few worldly possessions loaded up in the back of a bumpy U-Haul van. My ex and I had been together 6 years, never married. He said marriage was outdated. I said fine. Was I upset about that? Yes and no. Well, yes, I kept quiet. I left him. 5 months ago, he tells me he wants to split up. He said it just like that. I want to split up. No shaking of the hands, no tears in his eyes, not even a change must be lost, little missy, as he eyes her like she's a good meal he's about to devour. But it wasn't really like that. "Evening, ma'am," said the perfectly normal guy inside the auto repair shop. "How can I help you? Oh, and who's this cutie?" he added, taking notice of Lulu at my side. The shop's owner was a man named Richard Meadows, and he was a pleasant, polite, and well-dressed older gentleman, his gray hair neatly combed and his buttoned shirt starched bright white. He ran the place with his 2 sons, both of whom were waiting in the garage. "My sons Abel and Dean will run diagnostics. Then you and I can head to the office to call the U-Haul folks," Richard says as we walked up to them. "Don't want this to be on your tab after all. Abel, want to take the keys?" I handed the keys to the son named Abel, who was a little chubby and pale, his shaved head dotted with moles. He seemed shy and only nodded when he took the keys from me. I only mention Abel's appearance because the other son beside him, Dean, was almost shockingly handsome. He had a thick head of sandy blonde hair, a chiseled jawline, and broad shoulders under his denim work shirt. He was that level of teen movie heartthrob handsome that made my face get suddenly hot. Walking with me out to the U-Haul in the lot, Dean took out a clipboard, licking the tip of his pen as he angled it downward. "So, the drug just started rattling on you?" he asked. I stuttered through what had happened, feeling like a nervous high school girl again, but he just smiled and nodded the whole time, his voice calm like a doctor at a bedside. "Well, I'm sure we'll figure it out, and like my dad said, don't worry, we'll make sure that you all folks pay up, not you." I thanked him, trying to ignore the fact that I was blushing for no reason. "Good thing you've got a bodyguard down here with you," Dean added, smiling down at Lulu. "What's his name?" "Her," I said, and her name is Lulu." "Well, hi there, Lulu." When he reached down to pet her, Lulu stepped back and showed her teeth, growling under her breath. "Lulu," I said. "Bad girl." Dean just laughed. "Nah, she's cool. Just protecting her mom, right, Lulu? Honestly, I wouldn't trust some rando auto repair dude either." "No, it's not you. It's just my boyfriend, or I guess my ex-boyfriend now. Yeah, I don't know. I guess he just made her a little skittish around guys like you." Dean raised his eyebrows a little, then he pursed his lip and nodded as if he understood, and I appreciated that he didn't ask anything further about it. He told me to go wait on him, that he'd handle everything from here. When I got back into the office, Dean's father, Richard, had already sorted out the bill with the U-Haul folks. "Free and clear," he said. There was nothing else to do but wait for the van to be ready. A TV hanging in the corner was playing a muted episode of Judge Judy. Richard took a seat across from me in the waiting area and petted Lulu while telling me a little about himself and his family. His wife had died a 1.5 years ago, he said, passed suddenly in her sleep, which is mercy, I suppose. It's been a tough string of months, but he and his sons were close. They were getting him through it. Lulu seemed to sense his sadness because she showed a lot more attachment to him than most other male strangers. "I hope you don't mind me speaking out of turn," Richard said as he stroked Lulu's head, "but I'm relieved you have this dog here with you." "Why's that?" "Well, not to scare you, but there's been some incidents." He told me he didn't want to cause any undue worry, but there'd been several women found dead in the woods beyond the cornfields down the highway over the past 1.5 years. All the victims were like you, young women traveling alone. So, it's good you got this girl here, Richard said as he put his face close to Lulu, who licked him on the cheek. "Aw, good girl. Such a sweet." "I mean, I appreciate you giving me a heads up, at least," I said. "Sure, like I said, didn't mean to scare you. Probably nothing." "No, it's nice of you. You guys have all been really nice," I added. Dean was, he was very helpful. "That's just the wonderful service and dedication you would expect from the world-famous team at Richard & Sons Auto Repair," Richard laughed. "But I do thank you, sincerely." I almost asked if Dean had a girlfriend, as if that weren't a totally crazy and pathetic question to pose to place. What? My mind was going in so many directions, and even saying there was silence would be wrong. Because every few minutes, Lulu started up again, pawing at the back seat and the windows, barking like crazy and growling. It was like she was fighting a ghost and wanted to break out of the car. I glanced out the windows but could only see the darkness on either side of the road. That, along with the shadowed outlines of trees, stumps, power lines, all of which looked like monsters to me. Eventually, we entered South Carolina. We passed out of the rural area, and it was only when the bright floodlamps of passing car dealerships and 24-hour fast food places illuminated the inside of the cabin that Lulu fell silent. But even then, for the last 3 hours of the car ride, she never fully relaxed. Especially when we passed through the occasional pockets of empty rural areas, she seemed stressed. Occasionally she'd perk up, as if she'd seen someone outside her window, floating along with us. Her body language would stiffen, but now I just let it happen. I told myself she was just tense from traveling. She seemed desperate by the end of the trip. I could tell she was exhausted too. She hadn't slept all night. I was exhausted too. Lulu's howls and barks had kept me alert, but it hadn't done exactly well for keeping my eyes on the road. I felt the kind of twitchy panic that usually came from drinking too much coffee, my eyes starting from side to side, feeling like I was about to crash into something any minute. My sister had texted me before that she went to bed and told me the key was under the mat. It was around 3 a.m. when I pulled up to the curb outside her house and put the van in park. When I did, Lulu shut up. Okay, yes, girl, we're here. You can relax now. In the glow of the van's cab, I reached over to grab my night bag. I could hear Lulu breathing deeply. She was taking fast and muffled breaths, panting. It sounded like she was trying to catch her breath after running. Hey, chill out, I said, as I grabbed my bag and sat up again. What are you panting for, girl? We're already... I froze. Lulu was totally still beside me. She was facing the back of the van. Her mouth was closed. Her tongue wasn't hanging out. Her chest wasn't rising and falling. She was calm and focused, breathing silently and slowly. It wasn't her. The breathing wasn't her. It was coming from somewhere in the back of the van. Just then, Lulu showed her teeth and growled. Oh, okay, girl, I said, trying to keep my voice normal. I was shaking. I could barely feel my body. I was floating outside of it. Let's head on inside now. Come on. I fumbled with the door handle. I almost fell when I stepped out. I tried taking out my phone and dialing 911, but my hand was shaking so bad that I couldn't even unlock my home screen. Lulu hopped out and circled me. She was on high alert. Her head was low and she moved like a predator, keeping close to my legs. I walked backwards with her up the driveway, but she stayed between me and the van, pacing quickly from side to side. I'd managed to get my phone unlocked. I was about to hit emergency call button when I heard something move inside the van, a metallic click. The back door, I realized. I locked it, but it could still open from the inside. The street was dark, only one lamppost glowing at the intersection down the road. Everyone in their homes were asleep. I was totally alone. In the darkness, I heard something scrape at the back door from inside the van, then a soft clunk as the door opened. It opened slowly at first, as if it were a creature inside checking to see if it were safe. I hit the emergency call button just as the door swung all the way open. 911, what's your emergency? 911, what's your emergency? But I couldn't speak. I was frozen. The door bounced back as it fully opened, and then out fell a naked body, tangled limbs sitting the pavement, a mess of blonde hair shimmering in the dark. When the person rose up again, I almost passed out. It was Dean. Hello, I said on the phone. I need help. Someone, he was in my van. Please from side to side as if reprimanding me. I'm way out of your league, so the fact that I choose you tonight, it's really an act of charity. Okay, I said. I would have said anything to get him to go away, okay? I'm sorry. You want the truth? It wasn't even me who wanted you. I thought you were 6, maybe a 7 at best. But my brother, he thought you looked tasty enough, so I said, okay, fine. Sure, I'll get you and bring you back to him. I'm a good brother, aren't I? That's what good brothers do. They do favors. I wanted his first time to be special. No, I know you're a good brother. I still held up the phone in my ear, hoping the operator could hear me. This all could have been so easy. So easy. Would have all been over by now. But no, because Missy Yap 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 over here, he gripped the knife tight, squatting as he stepped forward, his eyes on Lulu. So keep crying on the phone, but make sure you tell them your dog is dead too, because the bitch deserved it. No! Dean lunged forward, slashing the knife at her. Lulu yelped and flipped to the side as the blade swept across her back, her body scrambling over the pavement. But then it was Dean who screamed, falling back as his knife landed on the ground. Fuck! Jesus Christ, my hand! Even in the darkness, I could see the blood pour from Lulu's back where the blade had sliced her open, but I could also see her spit out a mangled hand on the pavement, as if it were nothing but a squeaky toy. I'm gonna kill this dog, Dean screamed. Blood poured from the stump at his wrist. With his other hand, he reached down to grab the knife, then turned to face her. But Lulu was already upon him, lunging in the air, her own blood streaking off the gash in her back as she flew. This time, she aimed for his face. A severed hand, it turns out, is more than an adequate DNA sample. It only took a few days before the police were able to match Dean's DNA with the DNA found on the bodies of the 7 women who were found in the woods down the highway from the auto repair shop. Dean's mugshot showed a guy with a mutilated, torn-up face, bruised and bloody and held together with stitches. When the police had arrived that night outside my sister's house, they had found him half dead on the sidewalk, blood leaking from his neck. As for Lulu and me, I'd already carried her inside the house. The police found us on the tile floor of the kitchen, Lulu bleeding in my lap, while I whispered to her, I love you, girl. I love you so much. It wasn't long before Dean's brother, Abel, was arrested as an accessory to the crimes. During a news conference a few days later, the police chief said that for the past year and a half, the 2 brothers had been using road traps on the back road highway to cause damage to passing vehicles, causing them to stop. In most cases, they fixed the car, and that was that. Nothing more than a scam to gain business for their father's shop. But when the driver was a pretty young woman, the 2 used the shop's tow truck to lure the woman away to a remote location past the cornfields. DNA samples from at least 4 of the women were found inside the truck. With the last would-be victim, the brothers appeared to have gotten reckless and instead lured her right to the repair shop, said the police chief during a press conference. Had the young woman not been accompanied by her dog, The show itself was like a candid camera, with pranks playing on unsuspecting people. It would always start with Gurgles and Bugman hidden away at someone's home. Gurgles would face the camera, staring at you, his bony finger touching his lips. When the unsuspecting star of the show came into view, a laugh track would begin to play. You would see them go about their nightly routines, oblivious to the conspiracy that Gurgles and Bugman had involved us in. We'd see Suddenly, there was an answering enraged banging on my wall, louder than I'd ever heard, a sort of angry yelling. We'd all screamed and hid in my closet, yelling for my dad. When he came running, my friends begged him to take them home. I was left alone while they were gone. I could feel him, almost see him impatiently pacing behind the wall, back and forth, 5 inches of wood and wallpaper between he and I. I was so scared that I stayed hidden in the closet. Then the scratching started again. That was when I realized what I was doing. It was trying to carve its way through the wall and into my bedroom. I whimpered at the thought, and then the scratching stopped, and the banging resumed on the walls. It didn't stop again until a headlight to my dad's car lit up my room. I cried until my dad, always the hero, came sprinting into my room and banged on the walls. "It's still in the walls, Dad," I wailed. He nodded, giving me a pitying look, and pounded his fist on the demon wall. "Quiet down in there or else." Then he held me, let me cry at my fears, and told me it was okay if I slept on the sofa that night. Sometimes I thought he believed it was all in my head, but it wasn't. The murmurs, the knocking, and the scratching, I'd been hearing it all my life. It was real. But if he didn't believe me, he just never let it on and never made me feel crazy. He just played along. I guess he never really understood my dad. I guess I never really understood my dad. One night when I was 16, I was awoken by an otherworldly, ear-splitting scream. It was so loud, so high, and so piercing that I screamed as well in terror. The scream ended abruptly, then a moment later my dad came running in. "You heard it," I cried as my body racked with sobs. "How could you not hear it? You had to have heard it." "Oh, sweetie," my dad said at the end of my bed, his hair disheveled and a far-off look in the middle of the night, bloodshot eyes. "Of course I heard it, but I was just an owl. I'm sure of it. We've been seeing a few in the neighborhood." "No, Dad, listen to the walls." "Lindsay, please, Dad." He sighed but nodded, and we sat and listened for a while. I needed my dad to know the truth and to finally believe me. We were all in danger, but no more sounds came from the wall that night. I didn't hear him again after that, not for a long time. The wall suddenly felt empty to me for the first time in my life. Maybe it was dormant, or maybe it had been called back to hell, but either way, I knew it would be back. Oddly, when the creature did return, I didn't really notice it at first. After 16 years, it was simply white noise to me, a background soundtrack as familiar to me as my own face. It took so long for me to process that it was back, and I couldn't put my finger on it when it actually started. I think that's what sealed our fates. In the end, the noises were just so inherent to me that I failed to understand how unusual they really were, and had been all along. When I finally did realize what I was hearing, I'm ashamed to say I almost felt relieved. The haunt progressed me in the same cycle it had all my life. First the groans, then the banging, then the light, lazy tapping, and then finally the scratching. Always the scratching. I told my dad about the scratching and about how I thought the creature was trying to rip through the wall and into my room. My dad laughed and told me there were 3 inches of solid metal on the other side of my wall, and that nothing, not mice, raccoons, feral cats, or even ghosts could come through my wall. And he should know, he'd built the house himself. And besides, he assured me, he would always be there to protect me. But in the end, he wasn't. Since I was moving out in a year, I decided I had no choice but to just stick it out. After 16 years with him, what was 12 more months? I grew unconcerned, lazy, and complacent. I ignored the noises and even started to bang back every once in a while. I used logic to pacify my fear, whatever it was. It couldn't come through the wall. If it could, it would have done so years ago. And I sensed that more than anything else in the world, it wanted out. And since it was still in there, obviously, it was trapped. And I was right. The night the door was opened is the most vivid memory I have. I was at a friend's house when my mother called me and told me to come home immediately. This in itself was strange, as my mother barely even vehicles, pushing past dozens of people, ran through the crime scene tape and directly into my house, and there it was. Across from the living room, next to my bedroom, the hall closet stood with its door open. All the jackets and sweaters had been pulled out of it, and on the back wall I saw it. Another door. For whatever reason, no one stopped me. I stumbled into the closet, through the hidden door, and out into the room I'd always known was there, but it wasn't what